Welcome back, everybody. Today we're talking about the Enlightenment Thinkers. So there's a list of people from this time period called the Enlightenment, which you are expected to know. So make sure you've got out this note-taking sheet. I'd pause the video till you get that out, and then when you are ready, we'll begin. So we're going to talk about this time period called the Enlightenment. Specifically a few guys that we'll see in a minute. And what you need to keep in mind the whole time is the Enlightenment thinkers believed human progress or improvement was possible through using scientific knowledge and reason and applying that to law and government. So basically they're doing the same thing that happens in the scientific revolution, except they're going to apply it to government and law. So, that's basically what this says on this slide. They're going to take reason and use that for developing governments and laws. Some of the things that they're going to include in there are religious tolerance. Remember, this is a time right after the 30 Years' War, and we saw big wars in on the island of Britain, and we're going to talk about one in Ireland. All these happened right before this. We've got Spain involved in all those religious wars. So they're going to start coming up with these new ideas for government that will avoid those things. And these ideas are going to directly lead to revolutions such as the American Revolution and the French Revolution. So, our first philosopher's name is Thomas Hobbes. He is going to write a book, here's a cover of it, called Leviathan. He's actually in favor of monarchy, and that is a fantastic picture of him over here, looking all Hobbesy. So, Thomas Hobbes writes in his book Leviathan that humans exist in a primitive, what he called primitive state of nature, and that they consent or allow a government to take charge of their country for self-protection. So he believed in a social contract. He thought that people believed in this. They want a strong government, and they are not worried about what type of government as long as they have protection and stability. So he actually thought the best way to do that is have a king or a queen, some sort of monarch. Basically, in order to protect people from themselves. Okay, our next philosopher, and they kind of build on each other. We have John Locke. John Locke, as you can see down here, is against monarchy. His book that you need to know about is called Two Treatises of Government. So, he believes that the people are sovereign, so the people are in charge, and that they consent to the government for protection of what he calls natural rights. Okay, so the people are sovereign. They are the actual government, and they let the government be in charge in exchange for the government protecting their natural rights, which he says are life, liberty, and property. So everyone has the right to life, liberty, so freedom, and property. And these are like mind-blowing ideas, because up until this time, everybody believed the king was in charge. Louis XIV, as we know, actually said, "I am the state." He was France. So this is the opposite of what those absolute monarchs were enforcing and expecting everyone to believe. This is the opposite of divine right rule. Which leads us to this guy and his fantastic hair, Montesquieu. He's going to write a book called The Spirit of Laws, which takes John Locke's ideas a little bit further. He says the best form of government has to be one that includes separation of powers, which leads to what the United States government develops a little bit later after this book. So you have the judiciary branch, which is the courts, the legislative branch, which in our country is called Congress. In many countries it's called Parliament, where they make the laws, and then some kind of executive branch, which makes sure the laws are actually happening. And Montesquieu is also really against a monarch, as you see here. So in the United States, we have one person who's in charge of the executive branch, and they are making sure everybody checks on the other branches to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And it keeps one person from, or a small group of people, from being too powerful. Then we have Voltaire. So Voltaire is a little bit different. His big thing was he did not want religious fanatics to take over. So we've seen it. We have Spanish Inquisition. It happens with the Puritans in England, and as well as other places around the world. But so he's in France. That's the last thing he wants. So he's going to write tons of stuff. Basically, well, the things you are responsible for knowing are that he believes religious toleration should always dominate religious fanaticism, and that the state or the government and the church need to be totally separate. So he does not think it's important what religion you are. In fact, he would prefer if you didn't have a religion, because he thought it was dangerous. But whatever religion you are should not have anything to do with the government. He's big in the freedom of speech. He has a famous quote, which he didn't actually say, but it does summarize what he believed well, and that is, I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to your death the right to say it. So he believes in all of these natural rights, including freedom of speech, and all of those that the United States is going to make a law later. But he was really worried about religion and government being mixed. Which leads us to Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He writes a book called The Social Contract. And what he says in that book is that the government of a country is a contract between the rulers of the country and the people of the country. So the idea is, if the rulers of the country are not doing what the people of the country want them to do, then the people need to replace that government with something different, which is exactly what happens in the United States. Well, when the United States is created. They did not feel that the government in London was following the will of the people, so they had a revolution and put in a new government. It's also going to happen in France, and Latin America, and eventually most of the world is going to see these. They're called democratic revolutions that come from this idea. So, the Enlightenment has a big impact on the world. And there are other writers, including Thomas Jefferson and the American people. But those are the big ones that you're expected to know for this course. The influence of the Enlightenment, or why it's important, is it's going to lead to the United States Constitution, and then the Bill of Rights that gets added on, and the Declaration of Independence. And also the documents from the French Revolution, which they looked to these things that George Mason writes for Virginia, and then the United States Constitution, which is written by James Madison, and the Declaration of Independence that's written by Thomas Jefferson. All of these guys are Virginians. Their ideas are actually going to be copied by a lot of these guys in France. And so the American Revolution is going to directly lead to a French Revolution, and then the French Revolution, in turn, is going to lead to Latin American revolutions, where they end up with democratic governments. And One thing I want you to think about as we wrap this up is what made these ideas really easy to spread around Europe in particular. Even as far as Russia, we already know Catherine the Great was really into these ideas, and they're going to contribute to social change in Russia. But try and answer this on the bottom of your note paper, and then work on your map.